The Interaction Between National and Organizational Value Systems by Gerd Hofstede, Journal of Management Studies, 22/4 July 1985. New heading. Abstract. Organizations have prevalent value systems which are part of the organizational cultures. These value systems show a national component according to the nationality of the organization's founders and dominant elite. Research data on national value systems in 53 countries and regions are used to suggest the kind of influence nationality is likely to have on an organizational value systems and what this means for the integration within an organization of persons and groups of different national origins. New heading. National value systems. Among the components of national cultures are the prevalent value systems that parent within a culture transfer to their children and so on. A shorthand definition of value is broad preferences for one state of affairs over others. They direct our feelings of good and evil. They are opinions of how things should be. Indirectly, they also affect our personal perceptions of how things are, and they affect our behavior. This author's research over the past 15 years have been into the scope of differences in national work-related value systems. On the basis of the answers to paper and pencil questions by matched sample of respondents in 40 countries, 4 value dimensions have been identified that together explain about 50% of the differences among work-related value patterns. More recently, the set of countries have been expanded to 50 plus 3 multi-country regions. The 4 dimensions were named. 1. Power distance. That is the extent to which the members of a society accept the power in institutions and organizations in distributed inequality. 2. Uncertainty avoidance. That is the degree to which the members of a society feel uncomfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity, which leads them to support beliefs promising certainty and to maintain institutions protecting conformity. 3. Individualism, which stands for a preference for a loosely knit social framework in society in which individuals are supposed to take care of themselves and their immediate families only, as opposed to collectivism, which stands for a preference for a tightly knit social framework in which individuals can expect their relatives, clan, or other in-group to look after them in exchange for unquestioning loyalty. 4. Masculinity, which stands for a preference for achievement, heroism, assertiveness, and material success, as opposed to femininity, which stands for a preference for relationships, modesty, caring for the weak, and the quality of life. In a masculine society, even the women prefer assertiveness. In a feminine society, even the men prefer modesty. For the operationalization of these dimensions, I have to refer the reader to an earlier publication. It is important to know that the dimensions were found in an analysis of country mean scores on value questions, not of the scores by the individual respondents. I call this an ecological analysis. If we want to find data on national value systems, we should use data aggregated at the national level. And in fact, analysis of country mean scores on 32 value statements for 40 countries, I find these three main factors. 1. Combining power distance with collectivism. 1 representing uncertainty avoidance, and 1 representing masculinity versus femininity. For conceptual reasons, I have separated power distance from individualism, collectivism, although the two indices across 40 countries are correlated. It appears that if we control the country's wealth, this correlation disappears. The index score for the 40 countries on the 4 dimensions correlate with many external measures controlled by others. A summary table mentions 30 under-survey studies, both on narrow samples and on polls representative of total populations, and 29 indices measured at the country level, such as incidence of domestic political violence or the obligation for citizens to carry identity cards. A recent ecological factor analysis of data collected by a team of academic researchers among studies in 9 Asian and Pacific countries using a modified version of Rockage Value Survey revealed that out of 5 factors found, 4 corresponded to the 4 dimensions described above. The origin of differences in national value systems are usually lost in the dawn of history and are a matter of fascinating speculation. Ecological factors cannot be ruled out as one of their components. There are, for example, across 40 countries, a highly significant negative correlation between the degree of power distance found for a country and its geographical latitude, that is, the distance from the equator of its capital. A plot of power distance times uncertainty avoidance shows that the combination of a large power distance and a strong uncertainty avoidance is typical for all Latin European or Mediterranean and Latin American countries, and not for other countries, except Japan and Korea. The Latin European and Mediterranean countries are, as opposed to the rest of the world, cover the former Roman Empire. It is likely that the pattern of large power distance and strong uncertainty avoidance, which still characterizes these countries, was set in Roman days. All these countries are the cultural heirs of Emperor Augustus. The Latin American countries' culture pattern was set in the early 16th century as a merger between the colonists' values and those already prevailing in the local civilizations. A case of a recently founded modern state whose founders are identifiable persons is Israel. In the research findings, the closest cultural neighbors of Israel is Austria. It is remarkable that the Zionist movement, which led to the foundation of Israel, was created by an Austrian intellectual, Theodor Herzl. Central European values became part of the Israeli culture. New heading: Organizational value systems. On a smaller scale, organizations have their cultures and the prevalent value systems. As these histories of organizations are more accessible to us than those of nations, the relationships between the founders' values and the organization's values are more clearly traceable. The early days and the early actors have an ineffectual impact on organizational value systems. Examples are the impact on IBM of the personal values of Thomas J. Watson, or the impact on the Dutch biochemical company NGSF of the personal values of J.C. van Marken, or the impact on the Red Cross of the personal values of Henry Dunant. The importance for organizational effectiveness and for survival under difficult certain circumstances of these organizational value systems has recently been stressed by US authors from the usual hard-nosed McKinsey school. They refer explicitly to organizational cultures following a trend to use the anthropological concepts in organizational analysis earlier noticeable in Europe. Founders of organizations, while usually unique individuals, are also children of national culture, so the founders' national values appear to be reflected in the values of their organizations, even if the organization spread internationally. There is something American about IBM in the world over, something Dutch about NGSF, something Swiss about the Red Cross. In the case of IBM, for example, in-company training still today imbues both new and old members of IBM with Watson's three basic beliefs: respect for the individual, IBM means service, and the pursuit of excellence. The first and the third reflect the founders' roots in an individualistic masculine society. The stress on service is not a US mainstream culture characteristic. It represents a feminine value and is no doubt rooted in Watson, Sir Quaker's past. The Quakers represent a feminine subculture in the USA. There is more, obviously, than these three beliefs, which betrays IBM's US origins. There is its commitment to money incentives and to awards, its distrust of labor unions and joint constellation bodies, its universalism in handling its customers, and there are numerous small aspects of daily company practices which strike the visitor from outside, but which the insider has long stopped noticing. The reason why the founders have such an impact is that they are the only ones who can fully adapt the organizations to themselves. Every person who joins later will to an extent have to adapt him/herself to the organizations. Joiners go through the processes of selection, self-selection, and socialization. If the fit between their values and the organization's values is too poor and they can't be socialized, they will separate themselves or be separated from this organization. This paper will consider the problems of joiners from different cultures with their corresponding value systems. Such problems arise with the employment of migrants or minority workers, the creations of foreign subsidiaries by multinational businesses, schools, or religious organizations, or mergers of business across national borders. In the case of employment of migrant or minority workers, the problems are not only cultural but also sociological. The mere situation of there being minority groups in a society creates problems of discrimination, hetero and ultra stereotyping, and role-constrained behavior. The real problem in this case is not too much the minority as the way the majority reacts to it. Even minorities that are culturally very similar to the majority can suffer from this. The real cultural integration problems, differences in values, in mental programming, come on top of this. In the case of foreign subsidiaries, we see the development of subsidiary cultures which are hybrids between the international organizational culture and local national cultures. The difference in work-related values Conrad referred to earlier were found among employees or subsidiaries of the same multinational businesses. In the case of well-integrated multinationals with a strong organization culture, the outsider is struck by the similarity of members of the organization in spite of different national origins. He's a typical shellman, even if he's Japanese. However, inside such multinationals, there is still a rich folklore about how different the various nationals behave and how cunningly cooperation policies are bent in country X. Multinational subsidiary employees, like all humans, are both similar and different. New heading: Different implicit models of organizations. The four value dimensions mentioned above, which distinguish national value systems, do affect both individuals and organizations, and therefore the integration between them. The dimensions of power distance and uncertainty avoidance affect the structuring and functioning of organizations. The true central problems in any organizing acts are, after all, how to distribute power, who should decide what, and how to control uncertainty in members' behavior, in the quality of output, and for assuring continuity. The organizing act itself consists in the manipulation of symbols which should induce in members the intended behavior. But this presupposes the members are culturally conditioned to attach the intended meaning to these symbols, such as job titles, written instructions, rewards, and punishments. Different combinations of power distance and uncertainty avoidance lead to different implicit models in people's minds of what an organization should be. On the basis of an unpublished study by Stevens, I have argued that large power distance plus strong uncertainty avoidance lead to people viewing an organization as a pyramid of people. That is a hierarchical bureaucracy. Small power distance plus strong uncertainty avoidance leads to viewing it as well-oiled machine. That is an impersonal bureaucracy. Small power distance plus weak uncertainty avoidance leads to viewing it as a village market. That is an ad hocracy. And large power distance plus weak uncertainty avoidance leads to viewing it as a family. Implicit models of organizations obviously do not depend on nationality alone. They are also affected by the purpose of the organization. A police department will always be more likely like a pyramid of people, a post office like a well-oiled machine, a research department like a village market, a corner grocery shop like a family. Furthermore, implicit models are also affected by the specific values of any specific organization. Members of the same organization will tend to share the same implicit model. If a person from another culture joins, he or she may initially hold the wrong model and be ineffective until he/she has adapted to the others. This applies even if the alien comes as a boss. In cultural matters, the boss has to adapt to the subordinates in order to be effective. In the longer run, he or she can try to educate the subordinates by educating against the culture is an uphill, but educating against culture is an uphill battle. Implicit models can also be shown to relate to social class. In particular, power distance decrease with increasing social class. In small power distance countries, the working class subculture maintains larger power distances. This facilitates, in fact, the integration of migrant workers from large power distance countries on the job. With the help of Figure 1, we can predict the kind of cultural misfits that will arise from different combinations of individuals and organizations. An African doctor comes to work in a Belgian hospital. He will expect structures to yield to the personal authority of bosses, and it will take a long time before he understands